All right, we'll pick up where we left off. Mr. Kerr.
If I could answer, we have a little bit more detail.
Okay.
On the answer for height building, there is a definition for grade in the definitions, but we'll double check that it's clear enough. We are bringing back the full set of definitions for amendment, we think, in November. That's our plan anyway.
It's 110.446, and it says grade means a reference plane representing the average of finished ground level along the exterior edge of the fence, hedge, or wall. That's the only definition of grade that exists in the code.
Thank you. And this section is dealing with heights. We would use the grade, and what it's saying is that when you're in the special flood hazard area, we don't have to use the grade. We will use the base flood instead. But what's been happening is it's staying at base flood even though we're making the floors go up. So that has the effect of scrunching from the top. So,
now, during the break, I kind of picked up on that as well. But I guess my only point left then would be in the special flood area, hazard area. Should that read that it must be measured?
Well, we can say
or shall be.
We could say shall or will be. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just a.
Yeah, we can do that. Actually, the whole city's in the special flood hazard area, but. You never know in the future what will happen, so we leave the potential for both possibilities in there, but we will look at that.
I only bring it up for reference, that's all.
Yes, thank you.
Are we saying that's going to be changed to shall?
We can put that in there, either shall or will. Rob, Mr. Eschenfelder, do you make the... They've kind of moved away from putting shall in things.
Okay.
Well, do you wish to recommend to the commission that it be mandatory?
So that, I guess that's the question is, is there an either or option if there's one beneficial in one way or another, but to whom would it be of the benefit that gets to choose which measurement device you use?
Well, that's a planning expertise to guide you on or make a recommendation, and then you all decide. All I'm saying is, legally speaking, if you want something to occur mandatorily each and every time, you have to use shall or must. And when you get into using may or might or any of that kind of stuff, what does that even mean?
Right.
Sure, exactly. Those are things that have been carried over from many years, but we can certainly put a recommendation in for the commission's packet that you suggest changing that to may or must or shall.
Or shall, okay. All right, everybody in agreement with that?
Yes, I have a question.
Sir, go ahead.
So in the definition, it talks about wall or fence as being the grade level.
The outside of the wall of the fence or the building, or
It didn't say building, it said wall or fence.
It did add buildings, well, it says wall, and in that case, the outside of what we're using would be the outside wall of the house.
Then it needs to describe that it needs to be the outside wall of the house, because you could have a wall where people have already, the next door has already raised their level of their property legally or illegally or whatever the case may be.
Well, this says building height. This is a building height for buildings.
But
buildings don't include guard walls.
But it's based on that grade, right?
For anything that qualifies as a building, yes.
So what I was maybe I'm speaking wrong, but when you have like in some of the residents, you have a wall. How do you deal with the situation where you have somebody that's already raised their property a foot? Yours is a foot down, and you're telling the person that's now building the house that yours has to be a foot lower than the next door neighbor's.
Well, there's two different things happening. Mr. Eschenfeld was reading the definition of what is grade, and we measure grade in a number of different circumstances, not only to apply to the height of the building. This particular one was dealing just with the height of the building. Now, if you have a grading issue and somebody's building their lot up flush against yours, we don't allow that anymore. It has been done in the past, and when that's been done, people put in retaining walls. They have to retain any kind of drainage, obviously, but those great big raised yards are not allowed by all of the code changes that have been made to the floodplain ordinance recently, so that it shouldn't be affecting people. It has been a problem because when those yards were raised really high and then somebody put a wall there and they wanted to put a fence, they put the fence inside the wall, and then the fence was measured from that new height, and they ended up being higher than would have been allowed for the person next door. And yeah, we don't have a means of allowing fences to vary depending on what the neighbor's height is.
Okay.
So that's only come up the one time since I've been here because of one yard that was raised significantly. But those kind of raises are not allowed, and when anybody's brought that much dirt in to affect that kind of level change, we've made them haul the dirt back out. Now, it may be sometime in the future, there may be policies that allow everybody to raise their yards because of sea level rise. I don't know. That would take some very controlled and concerted effort and a lot of engineering so that those situations don't come up where somebody raises their yard one at a time, and somebody raises their yard and they create major drainage and other kinds of problems and runoff problems and hydrology problems because of the way the water comes in and moves back out. That's something that FEMA's not ready to embrace at all. In fact, that kind of fill is anathema to our staying in the CRS program and the flood insurance program. So at this time, we couldn't do that anyway, but we've been really careful since I've been watching that we not get into those situations again.
So you have the fence at grade and you have the wall at grade. Should the wall be described as the structure's wall or
No, because there could be other walls. That fence at grade, in this case, it is referring to the building, and a building is something with walls and roofs. But we have to use the term grade wherever we're measuring the outside of. So if we're measuring the height of a fence, we measure at grade for that fence, which is the ground right on the outside of the fence. And we have to do that for the building code, as well as our own local code. If you're measuring a garden wall and we say it can be 3 feet high, then we measure it from grade at the outside of the garden wall. So everything that's built has a grade. And we change grade. The effect of changing grade is how we measure and prepare for drainage plans as well. So the grade applies in many different contexts.
So the grade includes the 18 inches above the street?
The grade of the 18 inches above the crown of the road is what you're referring to?
Yes.
That can create a new grade on the lot if we need to level up to make sure that the garage is above the water level on the street, yes. Then that's creating a new grade. And in that case, the grade has to be a certain elevation. It's actually an elevation because you lay a foundation inside there.
Okay. I just want to make sure that that's clear so that you don't have anybody that's trying to twist it or whatever.
Yeah, I think in the context of what we're talking about here, though, grade is almost a moot point because everything's in the flood hazard area, so we're going to be going from base flood elevation to measure our heights, especially if we're putting
base flood plus the freeboard, which is the point in adding that language in there, yes. Right,
so the grade is almost immaterial in this because we're all in a special flood hazard area anyway.
Okay.
I see a point for other things, but in this context, kind of immaterial. Okay, anyway. All right, so that's that one. Any more?
I agree, but I have a follow-up just for clarity in my own mind. On page 18, we'll just use this as a reference. We'll just use the R1 top of the page there. So are we saying, well, I'll read it out. No structure in the R1 district shall exceed 30 feet in height measured from the designated floodplain elevation on the flood insurance map, plus the required freeboard to the eave of the building, unless otherwise provided in the land development regulations. So you have base flood elevation. Let's say you have to go up 11 feet for the firm map, 4 feet for your required freeboard, so that's 15 feet. Is that where the 30 feet starts to measure from?
Yes.
Okay. So an overall, well, that's the clarity I just wanted to understand.
Perfect. All right.
Thank you.
You got it. Any more on that one? Any other discussion? I guess we can just call the vote.
We have a vote? We don't have a motion.
Oh, sorry, we need a motion, don't we? Aha, thank you.
I'll make a motion that we accept the changes as written for changes. Do I need to list each one of those?
Do we want to add the word shall?
And adding the word shall to 82-2.
Into the building height definition. Yeah.
Replace the word may with the word shall. Do we need to reference each section? Okay.
Well,
All right.
you said all sections as shown.
Throughout, okay. So we have a motion to accept the proposed changes to all the, throughout the city's presentation for all of the sections noted, adding the word shall to section 82.2. Do we have a second?
Replacing the word, I thought we were...
Replacing the word may with shall, yeah.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Now we can call the vote.
Now you can.
Sir, I did not, thank you. I'm failing at my duties. Do we have any public comment on this matter? Actually, I think I did before we had board discussion.
Asked if anybody in internet land did.
Oh.
Just because we have one person.
Anybody in the room have anything to say? Thank you, thank you. That's why you're here for the details. Seeing none, I would like to call for the vote. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Gaither.
Yes.
Commissioner Brooks.
Yes.
Commissioner Kerr.
Yes.
Commissioner Preston.
Yes.
Chairman Wyckoff.
Yes.
Okay, carries 5-0.
All right. Thank you. Next item is TCH 2021-10, text change request to amend definitions. City, please.
This is another quick fix for things that are causing problems right now in terms of enforcing code and the floodplain ordinance, things that the state, in some cases the state had problems with. And we started the big process of changing all the definitions and upgrading, adding definitions for things that don't appear in the code, defining things that appear in the code that aren't defined. It's a big process because it hasn't been done, it looks like, ever to go through the whole code. So that there are some things that are creating problems immediately. Some of those deal with the definition of what is a building, because in some cases it's inconsistent between the building code and the city's code. Contiguous, what is dwelling units for tourists, the definition of employee, height, and non-conforming structures or uses. So what we have proposed are the definition changes to those things specifically at this point, and as I say, the rest will follow. But this one specifies that buildings are walled structures. Contiguous is being redefined to be consistent with Pinellas County's definition, which will be important because our plans have to be consistent with Pinellas County. Dwelling unit, tourist uses to remove the maximum area, because right now we say that a hotel room can only be 850 square feet, and nowadays, you know, with extended stay, sometimes things have more than just one bedroom, or they have kitchen or a suite or something of that nature, but that's not technically allowed here. So we wanted to take care of that to make it more flexible and responsive to the current market. Then height to be consistent with the previous ordinance that you just, or text change that you just read. And definition of employee. Currently, the only definition for employee we have is somebody who works for an adult business establishment. So that's obviously not the only time they thought they should define employees, but it gave the impression that everybody in town who was employed works for an adult business establishment, so we wanted to make sure that gets cleared up. And the non-conforming structures or uses to have, that also include lots, because we do have lots that are non-conforming, which are usually the only ones that are open at this point. So there are several sections of the code, or several sections of that portion of the code in here, the definitions with recommended amendments. We recommend approval of those.
All right, thank you. Does anyone from the public or internet land have any comments on this before the board deliberates?
We did not receive anything.
None received. And seeing none coming from the crowded auditorium, we will go to the board's discussion. Anyone have any questions or comments? Guess that one came out pretty clear, huh? All right. Well, would someone like to bring forward a motion?
Before we do that, does that carry over with the height? Because it's the same correction that we had, the may versus shall, the definition.
Yeah, well,
will that carry over automatically, so we don't have to put it in this?
No, you should go ahead and mention it here, that it be consistent with the previous.
Okay. Then I'd like to make a motion that we approve the definitions as stated with the, I guess it's TCH 2021-10, with the way it's written, with the exception of, in the definition of height, we shall change the word may to shall be measured from the base flood elevation.
I'll second that motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Ready for a vote?
Commissioner Kerr?
Yes.
Commissioner Gaither?
Yes.
Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Commissioner Preston?
Yes.
Chairman Wyckoff?
Yes.
Okay, carries 5-0.
Thank you. And the last item of new business is the Planning Commission's schedule for 2022. You've all been given the proposed meeting dates. Don't know that there's a whole lot to discuss at this point. Anyone see any major conflicts or anything that we need to go over?
They've been adjusted for holidays, you can probably tell.
All right. So we don't need a motion to accept that intended.
You do need to
we
vote
do?
on it. You have to approve your schedule for next year.
Perfect, thank you. In that case, would anyone from the public like to comment on our intended schedule? Seeing none, we'll look for a motion to approve the proposed schedule.
I make a motion to approve the Planning Commission regular meetings as provided in the document for 2022.
I will second that motion.
Thank you. We can call for the vote.
Commissioner Preston?
Yes.
Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Commissioner Gaither?
Yes.
Commissioner Kerr?
Yes.
Chairman Wyckoff?
Yes.
5-0. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any old business on our agenda. Do we have any administrative or staff presentations to be made?
Yes, we do. We have
Thank you.
with us tonight Rob Eschenfelder, who is our legal representative, and he wanted to, or we asked him to, come and talk a little bit about voting procedures and requirements. We had a couple of abstentions last time. We want to make sure everybody understands when that is used and what you should be looking for in the future.
Thank you.
Chairman, members, good evening. By the way, I always enjoy seeing you guys do your thing, you know, like with the issue of grade, you know, that's exactly your kind of role, is to make sure you get it perfect. I was looking on Municode, and grade is used 43 times in the code, and it's defined once, and only in the subsection on fences and hedges, you know, so I'm sure staff's going to do that. And then I jumped over to the Florida Building Code, and it has something called grade plane, which is a different definition than, you know, so I'm sure as staff looks at that, you know, it's going to make sure that the right definition gets in there if you can't use the one that we read. But staff did ask me to come and talk with y'all briefly about the Florida law with respect to voting and y'all's role in voting in quasi-judicial and in legislative matters. And so really I wanted to cover 2 statutes with you tonight. I would reiterate that we are, we serve as your lawyer, and so over and above these statutes, if you ever have any questions about your particular official duties, public record, sunshine, always feel free to give us a call, and we'll help guide you on those issues. But the first one that I thought was applicable to the topic is Florida Statute 286.0115, and it is called Access to Local Public Officials, Quasi-Judicial Proceedings on Local Government Land Use Matters. So as y'all know, you deal mostly with legislative stuff like you did tonight, how should the code read and so forth, but on occasion there are quasi-judicial matters where a particular person is coming and looking for a rezoning or a development agreement kind of thing, and so those, everybody gets sworn in, and so I'll read you the most important parts of that particular statute, and you can ask me any questions that you want to on it. But subsection C says, any person may discuss with any local public official the merits of any matter on which action may be taken by any board or commission on which the local public official is a member. So what does that mean? That means if somebody stops you on the street and says, I know that you are a member of the Planning Commission, I am a citizen of this city, or I am the architect for the applicants or whatever, and I want to talk to you about this, this subsection does allow you to listen to that person. But we'll talk about then what happens. Sub 1 of that subsection says, the substance of any ex parte communication with a local public official which relates to a quasi-judicial action pending before the official is not presumed prejudicial to the action if the subject of the communication and the identity of the person, group, or entity with whom the communication took place is disclosed and made part of the record before final action is taken on the matter. So what does that mean? That means if that person pulls you aside and gives you an earful, when it comes time for this meeting, or before, you can send an email to staff, you could do up a memo or whatnot, but what you were told by that person or entity has to come before the parties, either the proponent, the applicant, or any opponents that have registered, because they need the opportunity to tell you, whoa, what you heard, what you were pulled aside and, given an earful, that is wrong, and let us tell you why, because it's quasi-judicial and they have rights. So you can't vote on something that you were told offline outside of the meeting and not let everybody know that that's going to be part of your voting. So anybody have any questions on that? Yes, sir.
Would you use your microphone, Mr. President? Thank you.
I'm sorry. I understand that, the way I understand it, if it's just Joe Doe off the street and they have no particular interest in the matter, it doesn't have to be disclosed.
No, every such communication has to be disclosed. So if Joe, if it's a quasi-judicial matter that is before you, not the legislative stuff, they could pull you aside about the stuff you did tonight and say, I think, grade should be defined. You don't have to talk about that. It's a policy issue. But if it's a quasi-judicial matter where it's a rezone or whatnot, yes, any person or entity that pulls you aside, that sends you an email, whatnot, has to be disclosed either before or during the meeting at which time you're going to vote.
Thank you.
Not just the parties, anybody.
Thank you.
Okay. So then sub 2 says a local public official may read a written communication from any person. However, a written communication that relates to a quasi-judicial action pending before the local public official shall not be presumed prejudicial to the action, and such written communication shall be made a part of the record before final action on the matter. So same theme, if an applicant or a Joe Blow citizen sends you an email, Commissioner, and says, I can't make it to the meeting tonight, but here is this article I found on why this development is going to be terrible or whatnot, you have to put that into the record, give it to the clerk, and disclose it so that your fellow commissioners know about it and that members of the audience, and in particular the parties, know about it. So same kind of thing as with the verbal. Local public, and the easiest way to do that, by the way, is just flip it right to staff, because staff is going to instantly keep the record. That takes care of your duty. And sub 3, a local public official may conduct investigations and site visits and may receive expert opinions regarding quasi-judicial action pending before them. Such activities shall not be presumed prejudicial to the action if the existence of the investigation, site visit, or expert opinion is made a part of the record before final action on the matter. So here is talking about sometimes the individual planning commission member, and I've done this when I've sat on St. Pete's Planning Commission, or individual governing board members want to go see the site, walk around the site, whatnot, because they want to get a visual. Maybe they're not familiar with it. You're totally allowed to do that. You are allowed to go on the internet and look up some fact or whatnot, and you're allowed to, if your next door neighbor is an expert architect or engineer or whatnot, they can purport to give you an opinion. Those are all fine, but again, just like with talk with other people or documents you're given by other people, if you do that investigation on your own, you need to disclose that, and usually that's done at the beginning of the meeting. Before anybody even starts, you say, Mr. Chairman or Ms. Chairman, I'd like to make a disclosure that last Saturday I went out and did a site visit. Here is what I saw, you know, in case anybody wants to know. And that clears you of your obligation. But either that or receiving expert opinions or conducting your own independent investigation have to be disclosed. And just as your lawyer, my recommendation, I can understand a site visit, especially if you've never been to the place before and you want to get a perspective. That's great. Doing your own investigation can lead to problems that, you know, I think it's better in that case if you've got a burning question is to tell staff, look, I've got a burning question about this thing that's coming up in 2 weeks. Can you look into that, and can you address that, staff, when you make your presentation? So put it on the professional staff to do, because y'all want to keep your vision of being neutral and fair, you know, and so if you even give off the vibe, and I know you all are, you know, that's why you get appointed to these things, but applicants might not know that. So they may start to feel, well, wait a minute, this person went out and did their own investigation, and it looks like everything they found is against me. And so now, as the applicant, I'm thinking, is this person not going to be fair or neutral? And we create issues that we don't necessarily need. So site visits you could do, but if it's investigation kind of stuff, ask staff to look into it for you. They're always going to be helpful to help you out in that capacity. And so then the last subsection for this particular statute is disclosure, and that is to say the disclosures we've been talking about must be made before or during the public meeting at which a vote is to be taken on such matters, so that persons who have opinions contrary to those expressed in the ex parte communication are given reasonable opportunity to refute or respond to the communication. So that's 286.0115. I'm sure you're going to remember all that, so I don't, you know, but if you need to call me and get a refresher, please feel free to. So then the only other statute, I think, and this kind of, I don't know if a discussion occurred in an earlier meeting that I wasn't at, why staff wanted me to talk about voting, but Florida Statute 286.012 is called Voting Requirement at Meetings of Governmental Bodies. And what that statute says is a member of a state, county, or municipal governmental board or commission, which was what you all are, who is present at a meeting of any such body at which an official decision, ruling, or other official act is to be taken or adopted, may not abstain from voting in regard to any such decision, ruling, or act, and a vote shall be recorded or counted for each such member present, unless there is or appears to be a conflict of interest under Florida Statute 112-311, 313, or 3143. Those, as you all know, because you got your little ethics pamphlets, are the things like conflicting employment or contractual relationship, a business relationship with the person, that the person is your relative, your spouse, or your business partner, something like that, that are covered under those statutes. If that is the case, then the statute says if there is a conflict under those particular statutes, the member shall comply with the disclosure requirements of 112-3143. Basically, the clerks know this. There's a form that the state has promulgated that is a conflict form, and you just ask the clerk's office for one, and it just says, for this particular matter is coming before me, I feel that I have a conflict under this particular statute, and here's what the conflict is. You know, I was in business with this person is my cousin, you know, whatever the issue is, and then you're not going to be voting on that. You will be prohibited to. If the official decision, ruling, or act occurs in the context of a quasi-judicial proceeding, a member may abstain from voting if the abstention is to assure a fair proceeding free from bias or prejudice. And so what that means is that you've got your regular abstention, which is, you know, I've done business with the person's my relative, but then you also have, in a quasi-judicial only, that if you feel that as a matter of fairness or avoidance of prejudice, abstention needs to occur, then you can also abstain for that reason. Now, that doesn't mean, I don't know if this is why staff asked me to present, but it doesn't mean that you're uncomfortable voting on this, or you may be thinking about running for the commission and you know that this powerful applicant will not, you know, support your campaign if you vote against them, or whatever the reason may be. That's not a allowable reason to abstain. You took an oath to do your jobs here. The statute requires you to vote, and so you've got to vote your conscience. If you feel you can't vote because you need more information, then you ask staff for more information. You ask your colleagues to continue the matter to the next hearing or whatnot. But you can't sort of duck under your desk and avoid your responsibility. And you got to take a stand one way or the other based upon the evidence that you heard at the hearing or whatnot. And so what does that mean, that sentence that got, the last sentence of that statute about free from bias or prejudice? It got tacked on, historically, it got tacked on to the law by then Senator Latvala. You all know the Latvalas. And at the time, his wife, I think, was on the school board or the county commission, one or the other, and someone accused her of voting on something that wouldn't have fit as a statutory conflict, you know, the doing business with or whatnot, but still that she had taken such a public stand or whatnot, and she felt, well, I'm compelled by the statute to vote, and so it created an awkward situation. So that's kind of why that last sentence got put in. And again, that's only for quasi-judicial matters to ensure that there's fairness. So as an example, let's say our chair is an outspoken critic of the developer who comes in for the quasi-judicial matter. And our chair has printed op-eds about why this developer should be dropped off the face of the earth and burned at the stake and all that kind of stuff. It's pretty clear, even I'm just using the chair as an example. It's pretty clear that people are going to probably think that although he doesn't have a business relationship or a familiar relationship such that would get him, you know, conflicted out that way, that he's not going to be able to sit in neutral judgments of this application. That's the time when this kind of a sentence, you know, would come into play. It's a really rare circumstance. So that's sort of the statute on voting. Commissioner?
So I was the one that did that. And the vote was taken on something that I was personally involved in and financially involved in because it was my finances. And I didn't feel that I could vote on it unbiasedly because of those circumstances.
Well, certainly, if it was a project in which you were financially involved, absolutely, you should not have voted. So if that were the facts of the case, then you would have filled out the conflict form, because you had a conflict, you were tied business-wise to the project, and then you would have abstained.
No, and the subject that we're talking about, because I want to be open here and clear the reason I did this. So, in the past, I built a pergola like hundreds of others on the water. And I got a letter in the mail at that point that said I was going to get a $500 a day fine. So I ended up tearing it down. About $3,500 plus my labor. So I was personally, so that's the reason I couldn't openly vote. I still have that built up anger inside me about that when I saw so many other things. And I went to the building department at that time and said, look at all these others. Well, nobody complained about those. So that's where I was coming from at that point. Whether it's right or wrong, that's the reason I did it.
And was the matter that was before you quasi-judicial, or was it just a legislative code change?
Legislative code change.
Yeah, so in that particular case, I would have advised you that you were obligated under the statute that we just read to vote. So, water under the bridge at this point for that particular one, but hopefully now that we've reviewed 286.012, if anything like that comes up again, staff understands, and the commissioners who appoint you understand that y'all may come to this position with your own biases, feelings about whether this code should read this way, whether the citizen should or shouldn't be allowed to do this or that or the other thing. But you're appointed here because they trust in each of y'all's judgment to make your best call. And then obviously the governing board, gets the final call on it. But I think, in the circumstance as you've now described it to me, because it was legislative and because you really didn't have a statutory conflict, you were required to vote on that. So, in the future, if that kind of thing comes up, go ahead and take the vote.
Thank you very much for the clarification.
Sure.
Any questions for Mr. Eschenfelder based on his presentation? Anyone from the audience? Just kidding. I'm never going to forget that if I ever have to do this again. Oh, perfect. So there you go. Well, better safe than sorry, right? Any other discussion from the members of the commission? Our next meeting is scheduled for Monday, October 4, 2021, same time, same place. And if there's nothing more, we'll move to adjourn. Thank you.